Hi everyone, this is the second part of working with advanced layers. In the first part we talked about working with layer mask, and in this part we're going to actually start working with what we call our clipping mask. And what I want to do here, I'm going to go back to my tulips one and my snow scene. And what a clipping group is very similar to a layer mask. It is. What happens is, in this case, you group multiple layers together, and all the layers within the group will be visible only where there's information in what we call as the bottommost layer. The bottommost layer itself has a shape, and any layer right above it, if you clip it to that layer, it will conform to that shape. So we group these layers to create a interesting effect. Maybe, like, for example, let's take maybe a logo, a symbol, and you want to put a graphic within that symbol. Well, you can do so. You put the logo on the bottom layer, you put the graphic on the layer above, and you tell it to clip it to it, and the graphic becomes inside the shape itself. I like to think the base layer, the bottommost layer, as the stencil. And whatever you place on top of that base layer is the fill for the stencil shape, if you think about it that way. The base layer is always a stencil, and whenever any layers you place above it, when you clip it, it now becomes the fill for the stencil shape. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a blank new layer, layer 1. I'm going to rename it. I'm going to type in base layer. You can name it any type of layer that you want. It just depends on what you're working with, and if you're going to work with shapes, you might name it the specific shape that you're working with. Now, with this, I'm going to create a shape. I'm just going to go in and take my my ellipse tool, and I'm going to draw right on there. So I'm going to choose the Fill Pixels option on the options bar. It really doesn't matter what color you use. I'm going to use black. And to help me with my circle, I'm going to hold down my Alt key so I know it actually draws from the center point out. And I'm also going to hold down the Shift key to keep it perfect. I'm going to make it about that size. That looks good. And notice again, it's just a shape made up of a circle. Now once you get the shape on the bottommost layer, and again, it can be any type of shape. It could be actually your head, picture of your head if you wanted to. It can be a logo, it can be any type of shape, and it has to be at the bottom. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring over a couple other images. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my move tool. I am going to hold down the Shift key as I move it over, so that way it's in the center. Now what I've seen here is that my circle, my base layer, is a little bit too large because I can see where the black is coming out on the edges. So that's fine. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to my base layer. I'm going to take my Control key, Command key on the Mac, and I'm going to click on the thumbnail of the circle. Now when you hold down the Control key and you click on the thumbnails, you will select anything on that layer. It's an easy shortcut to remember. So instead of you trying to select it yourself, just take your Control key, click on the thumbnail, and it will be selected. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a select, modify, contract. And I'm going to do about 15 pixels here. And then I'm going to do a select inverse. So now everything outside in the background, I'm just going to do a simple delete or backspace to make this circle a little bit smaller. Let me reveal layer 1. There we go, that should work. And let me rename layer 1 to sunflower. Now, as you see here, the sunflower is hiding the base layer. You don't see the black circle. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the sunflower conform to the circle shape, which is at the bottom. To do so, all you're going to do is create a clipping mask. When I go up to layer, I'm going to come down and choose create clipping mask. When I do so, the sunflower is now in a circular shape. Let's look at our layers palette. You'll notice the sunflower has been indented to the right and there's a little arrow pointing down. That tells you that you have created a clipping mask. You have created a clipping mask. What happened is anywhere there's a pixel on the base layer, the circle fills it in. So it doesn't matter what shape it is. It could be any type of shape. It could be text if you wanted to. It will fill it in. So in this case, we have one layer clipped to the base layer. You can have multiple layers clipped to that bottommost layer. So if I bring the leaves over, see how it's centered. Now again, to clip it, you have to make sure it's above the top layer that you're clipping to. In this case, sunflower is the top one in the clipping group. It won't work if it's 20 layers above the clipping group. You have to be right above the clipping group. Now I'm going to show you a shortcut key instead. Instead of going up to layer and choose create clipping mask, in between layer 1, and let me go ahead and rename layer 1 before I forget, to leaves. Right between leaves and sunflowers is a little line. What I want to do is I'm going to hold down my Alt key, Option key for the Mac, and your mouse becomes two circles. When that happens, you just click and you create a clipping mask. That's the same thing as going up to layer and choose create clipping mask, and this time what you're doing is you're holding down the Alt key and you're clicking. Again, for the Mac would be the Option key. Now again, if we look at leaves, it's hiding the sunflower, but it's taking the conformation of the circle which is on the base layer. If you're really going to think about this and you want to do this properly, think about if you want something to fit to a certain shape. If you want it to fit to a certain shape, then you're probably going to think it's a clipping mask. So if you want to have a certain shape look, then think clipping mask. And then think that you have to have a base layer that has the shape, and then everything above it will automatically form to that shape. Now since I can't see sunflower, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the leaves, I'm going to move this down so the leaves are at the bottom and the sunflower is at the top. So that's what we call as a clipping mask. Let's take a look at another one. Let me minimize these other images I'm not using right now and open up the library. I have this letter N. I'm going to put it right up here. Now this letter N is not considered type, it's actually a shape. It looks in the shape of the letter N. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the fruit layer, I'm going to put it right up here. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to have to move the fruit layer so it's above what I call as the shape layer, in this case the letter N. So I'm going to bring it above this. Now what I want to do here is I want to make sure that the fruit actually conforms to the shape of the letter N. So what's going to happen is it's going to fill in anywhere there's pixels. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right between the fruit and letter N layer. I'm going to hold down the Alt key. I'm going to click, and all of a sudden the fruit is now within the shape of the letter N. Now I can use the move tool because sometimes you might want to move it around to get a better group of images, or in this case better fruits to show through. So you can move it around because you haven't deleted any of it, it just happens to be clipped. Now if you want to add like a drop shadow to the letter N, you can't do it to the fruit layer because the fruit layer, the drop shadow will be hidden. You actually have to click on the base layer to apply any layer style. So I'll click on letter N, I'll come up to the FX and choose the drop shadow. See how it adds the drop shadow? If you want to, you can always do it like in bevel emboss if you want to, and you click OK. So again, nice little clipping mask. And what we did was we took the fruit, we clipped it with the shape, and this happened to be in the letter N. Now, you can take actual type if you wanted to. For example, I can take my type tool, I'll type in the word spring, a little bit large here, I'll move it down in a second. And I'm going to choose a bold font for this, so let me change the font as well. Okay, I'm going to hide these other images so we just see the spring here. And what I want to do is let me just bring leaves over again. And I'm going to enlarge the leaves itself so it actually is the size of the shape of the text. I'm just using the transform tools to do so. I'm going to take my Alt key, I'm going to click, and now the image is inside the text. So you can take any text, type in text that you want, and put an image right above it and have it clip to the text. And what's really nice about this is if you don't want spring, you want to type in summer, or you want to type in fall. Now be careful, the image itself, like when I type in summer, is not large enough because you can see right here where the E and the R is, there's some black. So you do have to be careful in that. Or you can highlight text, type in fall. And if I wanted to, I can go up to layer 1 and move the image around to get a better look. I can also click on the fall layer and add drop shadows if I wanted to make it stand out. You definitely probably want to add a drop shadow to something like this because it really is sometimes hard to see if you have an image in certain types of text. So a drop shadow makes it really stand out. So it makes this is a really nice way to add a interesting effect to your piece by adding an image to your text. So again, just adding some images to that. Now I'm going to delete that and work with that a little bit different. So that takes it back to the original. Okay, so that gives you a little clue on creating what we call as a clipping mask. Clipping mask. Remember, you have to have a base layer. That base layer has to be a shape, and then any layer above it will clip to it. It will actually conform or fill in that shape. This ends the second part. Next part, we're going to look at adjustment layers.